In the shadows of a world veiled in secrecy, where the government harbors innumerable secrets, I found myself enlisted as an unlikely cleaner of their mistakes. Being a Green Beret wasn't something I had envisioned, but in hindsight, it seems I was the perfect candidate, a solitary figure without notable achievements or groundbreaking aspirations. I was disposable, a mere cog in their covert operations. It all started on an ordinary day, as I clocked out from my shift at a fast food restaurant. My life, mundane and uneventful, was ripe for a drastic shift. The men who approached me didn't offer much in terms of details. Their proposition was simple yet vague. Assist your country and don't look back. Despite the oddity of it all, I didn't hesitate. My life was soon transformed beyond recognition. Intense physical and mental training ensued, immersing me in skills and knowledge that seemed straight out of a sci-fi movie. The purpose of my training remained a mystery until its culmination when I was finally briefed on my new role, hunting down the government's failed experiments and other anomalies. My first assignment seemed straightforward, codenamed the Ice Cream Man. This target was once human, but now functioned more like a robot, driving an ice cream truck. The truck wasn't ordinary. Its music acted as a siren song, luring people to buy its ice cream. Consuming this ice cream plunged individuals into a fugue state for 12 hours, a feature undoubtedly appealing for certain government agendas. My mission was to recapture this peculiar entity after a lapse in containment by the overseeing scientists. Equipped with enhanced noise-blocking earplugs, I set out to locate the Ice Cream Man. He was easy to find, given the trail of vehicles lining up for his enchanted treats. I waited until he had served the area, making my job easier as no one would recall the events. Pretending to be a customer, I incapacitated him with a tranquilizer and secured him along with his truck, delivering him to the nearest government facility. The subsequent assignment was a stark contrast. Codenamed the Ripper, this subject retained most of his human traits, including emotions, but he was dangerous, capable of generating intense earthquakes. His volatility and potential threat to populated areas necessitated a lethal approach. Despite the moral conflict, I executed my orders, ending his chance at a normal life. Each mission seemed to test different aspects of my resolve and capabilities. The next target, codenamed Ghoul, was a horrifying creation. Possessing extraordinary strength and speed, its most alarming trait was a taste for human flesh. My orders were clear yet daunting. Capture Ghoul alive. Armed only with potent tranquilizers, I ventured into a forest popular among hikers, the Ghoul's new abode. This forest was notorious for disappearances, many unexplained, adding a layer of dread to my already perilous task. These assignments marked the beginning of my journey into a world of horror and secrecy, a path I had unwittingly chosen but was now irrevocably part of. Each mission, each creature, was a step further into the abyss of the unknown and the terrifying. In the dense, treacherous forest where Ghoul had taken refuge, the stakes were elevated. Ever since his escape, the number of disappearances in that area had skyrocketed. Fortunately, the government managed to seal off the popular hiking trail for the weekend, leaving just Ghoul and me in a grim game of cat and mouse. I had prepared meticulously, avoiding showers all week to blend into his world. If he sought me out first, it would simplify my task immensely. Tracking Ghoul was a gruesome affair. Following his trail marked by unmistakable footprints and distressing human remains, I knew I was closing in. The forest air was tense with an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of rustling leaves as Ghoul made his presence known. He was smaller than I expected, a mere 5 feet 6 inches, but his sickly yellow skin and receding hair belied his young age. His eyes, devoid of any color but white, locked onto mine in a chilling moment of recognition. The encounter was abrupt and violent. Despite my readiness, Ghoul's supernatural agility caught me off guard. He pounced from the tree, covering the distance between us in an instant. I barely managed to administer a tranquilizer, but it hardly fazed him. In a terrifying moment, He bit into my shoulder, tearing away flesh. I lay there, grappling with the agony and the real possibility of a second fatal attack. With sheer willpower, I injected a second tranquilizer into his neck, narrowly escaping a lethal bite. As he collapsed, I exhaled a sigh of relief that was as much about surviving as it was about completing the mission. I secured Ghoul with special restraints, ensuring they were extra tight given his strength. The tranquilizers would have to hold him until I could deliver this monstrous creation back to the government. Despite the pain and the loss of a part of my shoulder, I was alive, a small victory in the face of such horror. Upon handing over Ghoul, I requested and was granted a month's respite. The higher-ups were impressed, or perhaps shocked, that I had returned mostly intact. Those assignments were just the tip of the iceberg in a sea of nightmarish creatures birthed by science gone awry. Addressing concerns from my previous recounting, many were worried about the bite from Ghoul. Thankfully, I hadn't contracted anything from him. Tests came back negative, and I was given pills purportedly to aid my shoulder's recovery, though I remained skeptical of their true purpose. As for my employers, I often referred to them simply as the government, but in truth, I had no idea which branch I was working for, if any. It could have been the CIA or some other entity so deeply embedded in the government structure that its true nature was indiscernible. My priority was survival, not uncovering the mysteries of my shadowy benefactors. After my recovery, I was assigned a seemingly lighter task, codenamed Romeo. Romeo was engineered to be the epitome of charm, a living Adonis capable of enchanting anyone, likely intended for manipulating foreign dignitaries. However, his charm extended far beyond its intended scope, enabling him to escape confinement. Locating Romeo was easy. He was always the center of attention, a magnet for crowds, and the life of every party. The challenge lay in extracting him from his ever-present entourage. To devise a plan, I attended one of his lavish gatherings. There, amidst the opulence and adoration, Romeo approached me. His greeting, oozing with charm and a touch of French accent, was almost nauseating in its theatricality. Fortunately, his charm seemed to have no effect on me, though why that was, I couldn't be sure. As I stood there taking in the scene, I realized that capturing Romeo would require more than just physical prowess. It would demand cunning and patience in equal measure. My encounter with Romeo, codenamed for his irresistible charm, took a turn that I hadn't quite anticipated. I introduced myself as James, trying to blend into the extravagant setting of the party. Romeo, embodying the essence of a perfect being, extended an invitation to his estate, and I accepted, playing along with his game. This was a golden opportunity to be in close proximity to my target, perhaps isolating him when the time was right. Samantha, one of his admirers, guided me to Romeo's estate, a stunning mansion that seemed to leap out of a high-end simulation game. Once inside, I was offered an aged Scotch, claimed to be over 100 years old. I accepted it, maintaining my cover. Romeo's entrance to his own party was fashionably late, and upon his arrival, he sought me out, inviting me to a private room. This was my chance. The room revealed a different side of Romeo, walls adorned with photos of men and women, each representing a conquest. His proclamation of wanting me as his next victory was unsettling. As he began to undress, the persuasive power in his voice was almost overwhelming. However, I resisted and, seizing the moment, injected him with a tranquilizer, securing him with duct tape to silence any further hypnotic attempts. I faced the physical challenge of dragging his unconscious form out of the window and back to my vehicle. I assumed his friends thought he was taking his time with me. After delivering Romeo, I ensured to cleanse myself thoroughly of the encounter, which oddly made me reminisce about my previous mission with Ghoul. Next on my list was a target code named Kong. The result of splicing human and gorilla DNA, Kong was essentially a smaller version of the mythical Bigfoot. The goal here was not capture, but elimination, as tranquilizers were deemed unreliable against such a creature. Notably, Kong had already demonstrated his lethal capabilities by killing 2 scientists during his escape. My superiors were interested in dissecting him, particularly his brain, instructing me to avoid damaging the head if possible. My proficiency with long-range weapons was limited, as my training had focused on close-quarters engagements. Yet now, the need for distance combat skills was glaringly apparent. Kong had chosen a secluded forest area for his habitat, seemingly desiring a peaceful existence away from human interaction. However, that was not an option the government was willing to consider. After setting up a vantage point with a sniper rifle overlooking Kong's cave, I waited. Hours later, Kong emerged, stretching languidly. I aimed for his heart, but my first shot missed due to an unexpected change in the wind, striking a nearby rock instead. Kong's reaction was not one of fear or aggression. Instead, he turned towards me, his eyes reflecting a deeply human quality. He didn't attempt to flee, almost as if understanding the inevitability of his fate. It was a haunting reminder that beneath his monstrous exterior, there was still a part of Kong that was painfully human. The solemn gaze of Kong in his final moments lingered with me, a stark contrast to the frenzied end of the Ripper. Killing Kong was a task marred by a moment of hesitation, his human-like eyes betraying an unsettling awareness of his fate. In executing Kong, I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret, wishing he had been more like the monstrous ghoul, devoid of such humanizing traits. The decisive shot was taken with a heavy heart, and as Kong fell, a part of me did as well. Confirming his demise, I realized the impossibility of transporting his colossal body alone. I signaled for extraction with a flare, and as I waited beside Kong's lifeless form, a sense of disgust and introspection washed over me. The line of work I found myself in, its moral ambiguities, and the realization that I, too, might have become a creature not unlike those I hunted, weighed heavily on my mind. My next assignment, codenamed Delilah, presented a grotesque challenge. Delilah was a ventriloquist doll, seemingly harmless, yet endowed with a dangerous power of influence. One look into her eyes could render a person completely under her control. She was a puppeteer of humans, making them inflict pain and suffering at her whim. Delilah had been taken in by a family, manipulated by a scientist who had succumbed to her control. My task was to retrieve her, but nothing could have prepared me for the horror that awaited me at the family's home. The door was unlocked, and the moment I entered, the stench of death hit me. Inside, a gruesome scene unfolded. The family had been mutilated, their bodies arranged in a macabre display. The father, suspended from the ceiling, bore the brunt of Delilah's sadism. Then, from the corner, Delilah's voice taunted me, proudly claiming her artwork. Her tone was chilling, devoid of remorse. Approaching her with caution, I avoided making eye contact, aware of her manipulative prowess. I secured her and placed her in the front seat of my vehicle, as she requested, mocking me about my lack of companionship in this line of work. Delilah's presence was unnerving. Her comments were laced with malice and mockery, suggesting that she found enjoyment in the thought of having me killed eventually. She hinted at a deeper understanding of the human psyche, mentioning how she spared those she deemed truly evil for her amusement. Her words, though taunting, struck a nerve. She suggested that we were not so different, pointing out my lack of reaction to her horrific scene. This accusation, though provocative, held an uncomfortable truth. My desensitization to violence and death was becoming more evident. Delilah's assertions about my potential to reach her level of malevolence left me unsettled. I was torn between the curiosity to understand her more and the revulsion at what she represented. Her statement that I hadn't screamed upon witnessing her artwork suggested that I might have found a perverse sense of enjoyment in it, a notion that I vehemently denied but couldn't completely shake off. In this twisted conversation with Delilah, the lines between monster and hunter began to blur. leaving me to ponder the true nature of the monsters I was tasked to hunt. The haunting reality of my transformation became evident when I reflected on my reaction to the bodies in the family's home. A month ago, such a sight would have left me incapacitated, but now there was only a mild sickness, a sign of my desensitization. This realization led me to question my humanity, wondering if I was changing for the worse. My conversation with Delilah was a dance of wits and wills, as I carefully avoided her manipulative gaze while subtly probing into her nature. Delilah's taunting continued until I threatened to find a wood chipper, silencing her for the remainder of our journey. Upon delivering her, I reported the gruesome scene at the house. Expecting some respite, I was instead immediately assigned to a new target, codenamed Jack. Jack was an anomaly in my usual line of work. Seemingly a regular human, he posed a puzzle. Why would the government be interested in an ordinary person? The instruction to kill rather than capture only deepened the mystery. Tracking Jack proved challenging due to his constant movement, but my training eventually led me to him. Observing him, he didn't appear dangerous, merely cautious. Confronting Jack in his hotel room, his resignation to his fate was evident. He expected execution, yet I sought conversation first. Jack's revelation that he was once in my position, a hunter following orders without question, sent chills down my spine. His inability to bear the burden of his actions and his choice to escape, only to be hunted down, painted a grim picture of my potential future. The realization that there was no escape from this life except through death was unsettling. In a moment of clarity and cold resolve, I ended Jack's life. This act, while providing answers, also aligned eerily with Delilah's earlier insinuations about our similarities. Returning with Jack's body, I received no debriefing, just a nod of acknowledgement. It dawned on me that this might have been another test, one that I had apparently passed. My week off following the disposal of Jack was a period of introspection. It highlighted the emptiness of my existence, the isolation from friends and family. It was a stark reminder of the life I had unwittingly chosen, or perhaps one that was chosen for me. Despite the risks and moral dilemmas, I couldn't deny the exhilarating sense of being alive that this line of work provided. After the break, my next assignment was codenamed Mimic, an expert in disguise capable of altering her face to resemble Onion, though her body remained unchanged. The potential for such a skill in the hands of the government was immense. Mimic had escaped with other experiments, and due to her abilities, she was a high-priority target. The hunt for Mimic would be a collective effort among several hunters like myself, given the challenge of identifying her among the populace. Our information suggested she was still in the city, but if she had managed to leave, finding her would be nearly impossible. The task ahead was daunting, a hunt for a chameleon in a city full of faces. The pursuit of Mimic took an unexpected turn when a young man approached me, hinting he knew where to find her. His casual demeanor and cryptic words piqued my curiosity, but I had little time to ponder as he directed me to an old building. Inside, I found Mimic, tied to a chair, her distinctive scar visible. It struck me as odd that she was restrained and unguarded, raising questions about the stranger's true intentions. Before I could process the scene fully, the same young man appeared, not behind me where I expected, but in front of me, near Mimic. His presence and the way he had circumvented me unsettled me. His identity remained a mystery, but his purpose was clear. He was here to deliver a message, he claimed, from Delilah. The mention of Delilah, the demonic doll, instantly put me on edge. The man's insinuation that she held some affection for me was preposterous and unsettling. His demeanor was mocking, and his words seemed laced with hidden meaning. When I threatened him with a tranquilizer, the dart passed right through him, as if he were a ghost or an illusion. He casually walked through a wall, leaving me with more questions than answers. Despite the bizarre encounter, I had a job to complete. I contacted the other hunters to inform them that I had found Mimic and was bringing her in. However, upon returning to the holding facility, I was greeted by chaos. The building was partially destroyed, and many scientists and guards lay dead. My superior informed me that in our absence, a group had attacked the facility, leading to the escape of numerous experiments. Among the escaped was Delilah, confirming my worst suspicions and the strange man's insinuations. The facility was in disarray, and I was instructed to leave Mimic with them and await further orders. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Delilah's escape was somehow connected to me, as the man had implied she was coming for me. A few days later, with the facility still recovering from the attack, I received a call. It was time to hunt down the escapees. Along with 3 other hunters, we were given a list of the experiments that had escaped. To my dismay, Delilah's name was indeed on that list, confirming my fears. We were tasked with recapturing these dangerous entities, a mission that promised to be even more perilous and unpredictable than any before. The thought of confronting Delilah again, knowing her capabilities and the personal interest she seemed to have in me, filled me with a sense of foreboding. The line between hunter and hunted was becoming increasingly blurred. The complexity of the situation grew as I realized Delilah must be accompanying another experiment, given her inability to move independently. Scouring through the list of escaped experiments, I found no trace of the mysterious man who had led me to Mimic. Our efforts to recapture the escapees were somewhat successful, but Delilah and several others remained at large. Vigilance was my priority, knowing Delilah was out there potentially seeking me. Rather than returning home, I sought refuge in a rundown motel, sleeping with weapons close at hand. The night passed uneventfully, but the morning brought news of 2 experiments spotted together in a stolen car, seemingly attempting to leave the city. Joining another hunter, we pursued them, aware it might be a trap. Our suspicions were confirmed when the car pulled into an old cabin, displaying no signs of awareness of our pursuit. Prepared for a possible ambush, we cautiously approached the cabin. The other hunter, experienced and pragmatic, acknowledged the likelihood of a trap, but emphasized our need to act, regardless. Inside the cabin, we found one of the experiments, codenamed Trauma, unconscious. As we attempted to secure her, everything suddenly went black. When I regained consciousness, I found myself and the other hunter bound to chairs, facing the man who had appeared and disappeared before. He sat casually, unbound, with Delilah beside him, her eyes just visible above a cloth. The man's taunting words hinted at a deeper game. He mentioned bringing me to Delilah, and now here I was, captured and at their mercy. Delilah spoke, revealing her perception of me as bad for my actions, particularly for killing Jack. She differentiated between us, highlighting that I had a choice in my actions, unlike her and the other experiments. When I questioned their motives, wondering if they aimed to overthrow the government or expose its secrets, Delilah laughed. It was clear that their agenda was more complex than simple rebellion or exposure. The situation I found myself in was a twisted mirror of my own role. Once the hunter, now the hunted, caught in a web of intrigue and manipulation far beyond the straightforward missions I had been accustomed to. Delilah's involvement and the mysterious man's capabilities suggested that the dynamics of power and control in this shadowy world were shifting, with me caught in the center. The situation rapidly escalated as the mysterious man revealed he had no grand plans to challenge or overthrow the government, considering them too powerful and his group too few. His interest was solely in me, but for what purpose, I couldn't fathom. His response to my protestations about not being like him only hinted at a sinister future he envisioned for me. Before I could further question him, 2 individuals in lab coats entered. One abruptly injected me with a substance, and darkness enveloped me once more. When I came to, I was confronted with a disturbing sight. 2 bodies lay before me, one the other hunter, and the other appearing to be mine, each with a bullet wound in the head. Confusion and fear gripped me as I checked my own body, finding it intact and seemingly normal. How was it possible to see my own lifeless body? The man explained that they had attempted to administer a serum to me, but my body had rejected it. The sight of my own dead replica was jarring, a product of one of the escaped experiment's abilities. I demanded to know their plans for me, but the man remained cryptic, suggesting Delilah had one final act in store. As Delilah re-entered the room with trauma, I braced myself for whatever was to come. With no escape and nowhere to turn, I faced Delilah directly, staring into her eyes filled with malice and witnessing a cascade of atrocities. Yet instead of succumbing to her influence, I acted. Using a lighter hidden in my shoe, I set Delilah ablaze. The fire consumed her rapidly, as if she had been doused in gasoline. Seizing the moment of chaos, I sprinted out of the cabin, barely noticing the people scrambling towards the room to save Delilah. Outside, I found the other hunter's car and, with no keys available, resorted to hot wiring it. As I drove away, the cabin was engulfed in flames, and I pondered the fates of those inside, whether they were under Delilah's control or not. Since that day, I have been in hiding, aware that sharing this story could attract unwanted attention from the government. But the truth needed to be told. I refused to be a puppet, manipulated by the government or tormented by a demonic doll. My days of hunting down the government's mistakes are over. This account serves as my final statement, a declaration of my newfound resolve to live free from the shadows that once governed my existence.